Hey class, welcome back. This is session 3 for this week, and we're going to continue our lecture on ancient Rome. Before we go any further with this, I just wanted to explain how this video is going to work today. I'm going to do the PowerPoint here just in a second, and we'll run through. It's a very brief PowerPoint just showing some of the results of the Punic Wars and what kind of takes place that sets up for the emperors that are going to be coming in the Roman Empire. And then following that PowerPoint lecture here just in a minute, I'm going to speak to you about the papers, and hopefully these papers will be in your email box by the time you watch this video. But I just want to share some thoughts in regards to the papers and some of the common mistakes or errors that take place in writing, that did take place in some of the papers, just to give you information for bettering your writing for the next paper. So that'll be following this lecture on this PowerPoint coming up, and then we'll spend a few minutes and I'll talk to you about the papers. Okay, so stay tuned. We're going to look at the PowerPoint now. Okay, class, we are going to continue now with part 3 of our Ancient Rome PowerPoint lecture. Okay, so just a recap of what we looked at last time, because this is going to set us up for this short PowerPoint. The Punic Wars, again, took place between 264 and 146 BC. The First Punic War was land and naval war pretty much over the island of Sicily, and as we saw that Rome won that war. A little later, the Second Punic War was land and naval warfare again. This time we saw the General Hannibal, and you recall that he entered into Italy from the top of the boot and brought his soldiers and cavalry and his elephants with him. But it didn't go well for him. He lost a lot of men and resources coming over the Alps, and then he was not in a good fighting position, and his supply lines were attacked. And so in the end, Rome won that war also. And thirdly, we saw the Third Punic War, where Carthage had rejected some peace terms that were given by Rome after Carthage had invaded a Roman ally area. And so because of the rejection of the peace terms, Carthage then was put under siege. And after 2 years, the siege was broken, and the Romans moved into the city of Carthage and led to slaughter and taking many into slavery. And so, obviously, again, Rome wins, and that is going to set us up now for our short little lecture today before getting to the comments on the papers that you wrote. So we're just going to continue on here. Rome had some persistent problems after the Punic Wars. First off, they had unequal wealth distribution, which caused extreme class tensions and conflicts. So, and that's in many societies, but Rome, they also had it unequal wealth distribution. So you had the elites, you had the aristocrats, you had the wealthy, you had the leaders, all of them on the top of the food chain. And then as you go down, you had the less wealthy and all the way down to the poor and the peasants. So it led to class tensions, and it led to conflicts. The second persistent problem was that they had a great challenge in front of them. After winning the Punic Wars, they had to administer all of this land that they now had. Again, they're going to focus on the east now, but they had pretty much dominated the western part of the Mediterranean, all the way out to Spain, all of North Africa. So basically the Mediterranean basin they controlled now, and they were going to continue to expand. But they had all this new land. So how did they administer it? And it basically what happened, it caused a great economic and political strain. Thirdly, by 1 AD, so pretty much right the transition point from BC to AD, civil and military leaders had gradually dismantled the republic and imposed a centralized form of imperial government. So what that means basically is it set the stage for the emperors to come. So Julius Caesar and then Augustus Caesar. So the emperors are going to come, and that's going to be pretty much the leadership of the Roman Empire all the way until it becomes the Holy Roman Empire under Constantine. So civil and military leaders dismantled the republic. So there's obviously going to be problems there. More persistent problems. Conquered lands fell into the hands of the elite, and that's kind of a result of the Punic War. Who's going to control these lands? Well, it was going to be the wealthy. It was going to be the elite. And what happened was the elite organized their lands into, it's called latifundia. Latifundia, right here on the PowerPoint, you see the arrow there. And that means plantations, which was worked by slave labor. So you have the elite with lots of land and lots of slaves, which means they can produce a lot of grain or whatever their plantation is producing. They could produce this very cheaply, but you also had smaller landholders around who couldn't produce as much, and so their cost was a lot higher. And so what happened was smaller landholders couldn't compete, and they were actually bought out by the larger. So now you had a few elites owning a lot of the land. And of course, what's going to happen then is going to lead to civil wars. It's going to lead to tensions from within, and basically the peasants, there on the screen you can see the civil wars were fought by armies of landless peasants against large landowners and their forces. So these were not, these could be all over the place. These skirmishes, these civil wars could be all over the place in the empire. But basically it was the peasants, they didn't have any land anymore because their landowner sold the land and was bought up by someone larger, and so basically they formed little armies and they fought against the larger landowners. So what happened was there were these two brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus, brothers who attempted to limit the amount of land a landowner could own. So just in your imagination, how well did that go over? Well, it didn't go over very well at all. They thought they could ease the tensions, but really all they did was make themselves targets. And in 132 BC, Tiberius was assassinated and Gaius was arrested and executed on false charges. So they saw the issue. They wanted to try to help solve it. They wanted to appease the issue, but it didn't work out for them, and they both were killed. Armies began to focus loyalty on their generals. So as these armies were gathered and skirmishes fought, these armies began to become very loyal to their generals, and their generals became very powerful, and more maybe smaller armies would join up with a larger army and with a more popular or powerful general in charge. And basically this is going to lead to the rise of the emperor. Okay, and that is going to be it for our PowerPoint lecture on Ancient Rome Part 3. Okay, class, that's it for Session 3 PowerPoint, and we will pick up the PowerPoints again next week as we continue our look at the Roman Empire. To close out the video today, I do want to share some thoughts in regards to the papers. Maybe you have your paper in your hand by now. I'm not sure when you'll check your email inbox. I'm recording this on Sunday, so I'm hoping to have the papers emailed out to you tomorrow morning sometime so that you'll be able to have them this coming week so that you can see it by the time this video is made. And these videos may be used in the future, so if you're watching this video and you have no idea what I'm talking about in regards to a paper, well, this is just good information for you to know as you write your papers. But for the class here, I do want to share some thoughts. I gave the same assignment to the class in the classroom, and these issues that I'm sharing here today, they also had in the classroom also. The papers overall, the papers were good for all the students. The papers, in general, they did. You students did pretty well, but there were some clear issues with writing. Some of you, this may have been your first time ever writing a college paper. Some of you may not have been. Maybe you've written several college papers. But there were some pretty significant errors that I do need to address with you, because these errors were not just a basic spelling mistake or forgetting a comma, or maybe putting something towards the end of the sentence where it should have been at the beginning of the sentence. It wasn't that. These are pretty significant errors when it comes to academic writing for college. Now, when you're writing for college, it depends on what kind of paper that you are writing and how you write. If you're writing a position paper, meaning you're going to be explaining your position on some kind of topic, that's a completely different style of wording that you would use than if you're writing a research paper. And this was a research paper, a 5-page research paper. So what is it that you do with a research paper? So first off, you have your topic that you come up with, and then you have to develop a thesis for that topic. So if your topic was Egypt, well, that's very broad for 5 pages. So what is it you're going to talk about with Egypt? So let's say you focus it in onto the gods of Egypt. Well, that's still pretty broad. So you want to focus that into more of how the gods of Egypt affected the daily lives of the people. Okay, so I just gave you a question. How does this affect their lives? But a thesis is a statement. It's not a question. So what you do is you answer that question, and that becomes your thesis. So if you say, how do the gods of Egypt affect the Egyptians' daily lives? Well, then you make a statement. You say the gods of Egypt affected their daily lives in religion, or in how they dealt with the dead, or something like that. And so let's say you come up with a thesis statement. The gods of Egypt influenced the lives of Egyptians through their practice of daily sacrifices. That's your thesis statement. Very, very narrow now. Now all you do is talk about how the Egyptians would sacrifice to the gods every day. And that may mean their personal sacrifices, maybe in their homes. It may be sacrifices going to some temple somewhere. You could then start also talking about the priestly sacrifices that would take place every day. And it could also be, because they worshiped Pharaoh, the worshiping of Pharaoh. So you have now four areas. And now I'm kind of just going with off the fly with this. But now you have 4 areas that you could talk about in your paper. So let's just say you took one of those areas per page. And so now you have an introduction with your thesis. You write out four pages or so of the information on those 4 areas. And then you have a concluding paragraph or so to conclude your paper. Now what you have done is you have a thesis statement, and you have 4 areas that support that thesis statement. And then at the end, you conclude it, basically. You basically kind of regurgitate in a brief paragraph of what you just basically said. So that's pretty much how a research paper works. Now, one of the things that you have to do with research paper is you have to have your sources. None of you are doing any kind of original research. You're not going to ancient Egypt and going to some kind of a archaeological dig and getting original research to put in your paper. You're going to be getting all of your information from some other place. So it's very important that what you do is you interact with the sources that you have, the books or journal articles or internet source or whatever you have. You interact with those as you write the paper. And And that's very important because that will help you stick to the focus of your paper. If your focus is the gods of Egypt in daily life, then these articles and these books will help you focus in on that. It shouldn't be going off on all kinds of different tangents, and I did see that in some of the papers. Some of the papers, they were just kind of going off here and there, and paragraphs that had nothing to do with the thesis statement itself. Everything you write for a purpose. And when you're writing it for a purpose, the purpose is to support that thesis. So in your proofreading, if you're reading a paragraph and it's like, this just doesn't fit with what I'm trying to say. This is going off on some tangent about some periphery, something on the side. So let's say you're talking about the gods of Egypt, and you start talking about the Nile, and then how the Nile was used for trade, and the rising of the waters would bring silt, so they could have agriculture, and that really has nothing to do with the daily lives of Egypt. Even though the Nile, with the gods of Egypt, even though the Nile is very important to Egypt, that has nothing to do with your thesis statement about how the gods affect the daily lives of the people as they live their lives or worshiping the gods. So you got to really focus in and stick to that thesis statement. So you have to have a clear thesis. The person that's reading your paper, whether it be me or somebody else, should have no problem picking up a paper, reading the first paragraph, and saying the rest of this paper is about that. Okay. So if you have a clear thesis statement, then the rest of the paper has to be about that. So you have a clear thesis. Then you need to make sure that you focus your points on to support your thesis, and that's where a good outline comes in. Now you don't write an outline in your paper. You have that on the side somewhere. You put it down. This is my thesis statement, so you write that out, and then these are my 4 or 5 reasons this happened. Why was Nebuchadnezzar a great general? Well, I have 5 reasons why he was a great general, and so I have point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5, and then I write about those, and each one of them will be different, but it will all show how he is a great general. And so, or a great king. So when you look at Nebuchadnezzar, you focus in on these specific things. You don't go on, if it's about why he's a great king, you don't start talking about Babylon, and the geography or anything, unless it deals with Nebuchadnezzar expanding the geographical area of Babylon. But you don't have to get into the Babylonian culture or anything like that. You just got to stick with what makes Nebuchadnezzar a great king. So you want to focus the paper in. Okay, it shouldn't be going all over the place. And as I said, that did happen. Some papers really started trailing off here and there, and I was like, this paragraph has nothing to do with what we're looking at. So just kind of switch gears now in regards to how we write papers. When you're writing a paper, you're going to sit down at your computer and you're going to start typing. And as you're typing, you're talking in your head. You start saying these things in your head, and you're typing as you talk in your head. And what happens is we start to type as we talk. And that's not appropriate for formal academic writing. And the reason is, and I do it, and you do it, we all do it, is we talk inappropriately. We don't talk formally. We talk very informally. And that's where we start getting in with jargon and with relaxed speech and with slang even. So we start typing away as we're talking in our head, and we start using poor sentence structure. We start, just run-on sentences. And as you're typing, you're missing commas and using using phrases that shouldn't be in academic papers, like, for example, a phrase of, to push the point even further. Well, we don't need to push the point even further in regards to that the wording. Just say what you want to say. Just state the statement that you want to say. To drive it home. That doesn't need to be there. Just some of those kind of, it's basically relaxed speech, using words like dumped, instead of pouring something out. The person would dump. That's not formal speech. Those kind of terms don't need to be in academic papers. So you got to be very careful not to type how you talk. You have to really focus in on typing the sentences and all of that in a formal way. So the next thing I want to share with you about the papers was citations. Now I'm trained in Turabian. I know MLA. I know the different types of citations. I've done them before, but I'm definitely trained in Turabian, and I know what citations are. And MLA citations are very simple compared to Turabian. I'm not sure what took place with some of the papers. First off, a citation is where you are showing where this information that you have in this paragraph or in this quote or whatever came from. It's so you don't get accused of plagiarism. So you need to say where this stuff came from. So when you write a paper, as I said, none of this is your original research. Everything you're getting from some source. And so when you are proving your thesis, you type up a paragraph, and that comes from somewhere. So that paragraph, at minimum, that paragraph needs to be cited at the end with the MLA citation, which is the parenthesis, the author name, the page number, and then close parenthesis. And then that will coordinate with the bibliography. That bibliographical entry will be there to show me where you got it from. So you have to have that citation in there. If you quote something, direct quotes, then you have to have a citation after that direct quote saying where you got that from. Don't put the citation at the end of the paragraph for that. You have to have it right at the end of the direct quote, and then you can do it again even at the end of the paragraph if it's from that same author or even from a different book. You have a different citation. So you can have multiple citations for one paragraph. So what happened was I got papers that had no citations at all. Zero. There was not one citation in the paper. And I'm not going to accuse the student of plagiarism because I know that they got that information from somewhere, and it's not like they copied. You could just tell in the wording it wasn't copied from somebody. But you've got to cite. You have to. It is imperative. It will reduce your grades significantly if you do not have citations. Another thing that I wanted to share in regards to citations is when you have a direct quote from a book, you put the quotation marks, double quotation marks. Now, if that quote includes a quote within it, you cannot do double quotation marks within double quotation marks. It has to be a double, and then you change these ones to singles. Okay, that was rampant. People put quotes in there, and the quotation marks were all messed up. So it's very, very important that you borrow the information properly, and then you cite the information properly. So just a note on that: get a book, some kind of style guide or MLA citation book or some kind of citation help or something. It is so important that you cite. It is so important. The final thing I'll say about citations is it helps me understand how you're interacting with the textbooks. Okay, so if you have 5 pages and you cite an author and then cite the same author all through the paper, and then like your last page you cite 4 different authors. Basically what you did was you wrote a paper from one author's source, and then kind of to get the number of sources, have 5 or 6 sources, I think it was 6 sources, then you like put them at the bottom to get to that source. I understand. But what you need to do is you need to balance those sources out throughout the paper. Don't get all your information from one source and just cite that author the whole time and then kind of cram a few in. You need to balance it out. You should be interacting with these sources, reading this, and that's good information, I'm going to put that in there. If you have 5 points to your paper, and it's 5 sources, you could use like one page is a source, and so that's one author, and then you go to, oh no, here's another author, and the next page, here's another author. Or you can just mix it within. Maybe a couple authors have the same good point or good information for this point, and so you interact with the sources. Okay, so we're going to continue on now with a few other issues that took place. When you type a formal academic paper, especially a research paper, okay, so here's a research paper we're talking about here, you do not use personal pronouns in the research paper. You never write with using the word I or you or we, our. You never use that in research papers. If it's a position paper where it's like, your position on gun control, well then yes, I believe gun control, blah, 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 blah. But when it's, Nebuchadnezzar is a great king, and then it's like, I think that Nebuchadnezzar is a great king, and we should, follow the example of so-and-so, or whatever it may be. You don't use the words I or we in academic formal writing. Well, you don't. If for some reason you need to speak about yourself, maybe in a concluding paragraph or something like that, you need to use the words this writer, such as this writer holds to the truth of, whatever, John 3:16. Just making that up. You say this writer. Okay, you do not use the word I. The reason is because research papers is you are researching and you are trying to prove the thesis with facts, not opinions. And when you start writing with I, it becomes very opinionated. That becomes your opinion is now being stated. I believe this, or I think, or I agree. Well, that's not the focus of the proof for your thesis statement. Okay, just write the facts. Write the facts that prove that point, prove that thesis. Okay, so we don't need to get into a bunch of the personal pronouns with I and we and those things. And I guess the final thing I'll speak to you about today is, in regards to the research paper, is asking questions. Remember what I said about you ask a question in your mind and then you answer that with a statement. And that becomes your thesis, a statement. Okay. Some papers that I received had numerous questions in them. And I'm not even and the thing is that some of the questions, they weren't even complete statements or complete interrogative statements. They weren't even complete questions. They were missing the subject and verb, the subject. Basically, they would just have a verb with a question mark. So don't use questions. Again, here's your statement, and this is my proof. Okay, so you don't need to keep continuing to ask questions and then answer those questions within the paper. Like how, if your thesis statement is about the gods of Egypt and people's daily lives in Egypt, you don't need to say, how did the people do this, and how did the priest? You don't need to ask those questions. Just say what the priest did, and that's what you have to do. It's pretty simple. Okay, so I had to deduct some grades. I had to. I mean, I have a job to do. It's not anything like a punishment or anything like that. I just want you guys to improve on your writing, but we have a grading rubric at the back of the syllabus that you received, and it breaks down exactly what it needs. If there's not a clear thesis statement, then I can't give you points for a clear thesis statement. If your thoughts are all over the place, and this paragraph has nothing to do with what you're talking about for the paper, then I can't give you, the highest amount of points for proper flow and clarity of the paper. Again, we're college level, so if your paper was just riddled with all kinds of punctuation and grammar mistakes, then I can't give you full points for grammar. And then also with citation, one of the things on the rubric is MLA. It says it right there on the rubric. If you didn't cite your paper, I can't give you points for MLA. I can't. It's just I wouldn't be doing my job. That's basically what it is. I want to be gracious. I want to help. But when it comes down to it, there is a job that we have to do. So I just wanted to share those things with you. When it comes to Grammarly, in the syllabus it says that you have to run your paper through Grammarly. Now Grammarly is not. They give you suggestions for the fixes that they have. They see something wrong and they say this, but you have the option to ignore it. You can trash can it. You can fix it. Whatever it may be. When I ran your papers through Grammarly, I didn't correct anything. I just ran them through it, and I got the Grammarly score. If you have a Grammarly score that, if you sent me a paper with a Grammarly score that has an 81 or an 80%, there were things that could have been fixed. When you send a paper to me, after running it through Grammarly, that score should be very high because you've gone through and you have basically taken all of their suggestions and fixed it. So, if I'm getting a Grammarly score, running your paper through Grammarly, and it's like 95 or 97, okay, that means you've really made a lot of corrections. Maybe there's a few things that it picked up, maybe with some spacing or maybe some passive tense sentence or something like that. Then that's a pretty high score. I can really see you try to put it through. But if it's like a 80, a 75%, it's going to come up with like 45 mistakes. And then it's like, did you go through it and make these mistakes, or did you just like put it through Grammarly, you saw it, okay, and then send it to me? I don't know. But I put your Grammarly score on the paper. It did not go into the calculation of your grade. I'll repeat that. Grammarly score did not go into the calculation of your grade. Your calculation of the grade was from the rubric, the 4 areas of the rubric, or the presentation of ideas and MLA and the mechanics and all that. You can look at the rubric. Those are the 4 areas graded. I put those 4 areas right on your paper, and then I gave comments. Again, this is all to help you with writing. This is a history course. It's a survey course. It's not, you're not majoring in history here at Mid-America. But it is a gen ed course, and there is a requirement for it. And so you have to meet, meet the standard. So I hope this part of the video helps with some explanation, and definitely with what some of the main errors were. I mean, these errors, these errors were on a lot of papers. Many papers had some significant errors. So I'm not trying to be mean or harsh or, oh, you're such a hard grader or anything like that. But, I have to grade what's in front of me. And if it's a mistake, I can't just overlook it and overlook that and overlook that. So if you use the word I in your paper, 15 times, I didn't take all 15 points. Okay, I don't think I took all 15 points. But it was clear that you didn't understand, and you had used a personal pronoun in there and you can't. So this video is here to help you. Okay, I'm not coming down on anybody or trying to be hard on anybody. It's here to help you, and I hope it did help you to kind of focus in for the next paper coming up here at the end of the semester. These then errors then shouldn't be an issue. There should be lots of citations in papers, and there should be clear focus on what your thesis is and the supporting elements for your thesis statement. Okay, I know I rambled on here for a little while, but other than that, I want you guys to do well, and so I hope this was a help. Okay, well, I'll see you next time. Take care.